Hi, I'm Ian Harvey, massage therapist, and today we're going to talk about working with clients with fibromyalgia. We're going to start by doing a sample interview with an actual client, and then we're going to get her on the table, and I'll show you some of the changes that I might make for people with different types and degrees of these symptoms. If you'd ever like to skip ahead, you can click on the time codes down in the description. But before we move on, I want to talk about the fact that fibromyalgia is an array of symptoms, a cluster of symptoms, and it's also a spectrum for each one of those symptoms. Not every client will have all of them, and not every client will have them to the same degree. So the most important thing that I want you to take away from this video is that the more information that you can get from your present client, the better able you'll be to make the changes that they need. Some people, for instance, won't be able to tolerate neck traction. Others won't be able to tolerate having their legs moved around, things like that. And those are things that you can only find out by having these conversations. And the type of massage that you give will also vary a lot depending on what that client is able to receive. So some people will only be able to receive very light touch, but I've had clients with diagnosed fibromyalgia who wanted trigger point work. Unusual, but it happens. And be aware of the flare-up and remission cycle. People with fibromyalgia will tend to have these flare-ups where their symptoms increase quite a bit. They've got more fatigue, they've got more touch sensitivity and generalized pain. They have a harder time sleeping. Their mood will become worse, things like that. So if someone is currently in a flare-up, consider stepping way back and erring on the side of caution even more than usual. These clients might need shorter sessions, so if someone's currently in a flare-up, I might ask them if they are willing to just do 30 minutes or 45 minutes that day, and generally let their current state and their recent history of the frequency of their flare-ups determine how much you challenge their touch sensitivity. In general, I don't want to be much of a challenge at all. Some recent research suggests that a lot of the pain sensitivity and generalized pain in fibromyalgia is due to central sensitization, which is where the brain and the spinal cord are turning that sensitivity knob way up and listening really hard to every stimulus. And so we need to talk to the brain. We need to talk to the spine and let them know that there's no reason for that incredible sensitivity, that it can turn those knobs down, and the only way to do that is with pain-free touch. So when I talk to my clients with fibromyalgia, there are a few things that I always want to ask, even if it's not in these words. I just want this information. So I might ask about symptoms in general, but what I want to know is, Allie, when do you hurt and where?
I hurt pretty much all the time, typically in my upper back and shoulders, and now around into my chest.
Into your chest, okay. From there, I'd ask follow-up questions about the shoulder, about the movement of the shoulder. I'd ask about when this chest region hurts. I'd talk about getting permission about working into the sternum, things like that. I'd also ask about other symptoms like sleep problems, fatigue, mood problems, just so that we can track these things together. And have you had any recent flare-ups?
Yes, I tend to have more flare-ups when I try to do any sort of physical exertion.
Gotcha.
Like carrying heavy things or jogging. The only exercise that doesn't really hurt me right now is yoga. But pretty much anything else makes this chest pain flare up really badly.
And so, Allie, you've had massage in the past?
Yes.
Okay. What kind of massage is helpful for you?
Usually something that focuses on the specific areas where I feel pain. Mm-hmm. And usually it has to hurt a little bit to make it feel better.
Okay, sounds good. And have you ever had a massage that made things worse?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Tell me a little about that. What can make things worse?
I think sometimes just having somebody that's working either the wrong areas or putting too much pressure on it and just like really going in too hard. There's a fine balance between like not using enough pressure and using so much pressure that I'm sore for 3 days.
Gotcha. So for me, that's going to be very important for us to stay in communication. If it's ever feeling like that too deep pressure, I want to know about it. And also if it's just feeling like nothing, I want to know about that too, okay?
Okay.
All right, great. So first of all, when I'm working with a client with fibromyalgia, I want to make any adjustments to my table that they might need to be comfortable. People with fibromyalgia will often have discomfort while sleeping just from staying in one position for too long or being in an unusual position, and massage can be a fairly unusual position. We're not used to laying flat on our front. So for Allie, who has had some low back pain in the past after massage, I've got a pillow under her abdomen, so it's about right here. It's a smaller pillow, and that can take off some of that pressure from being so completely flat. And when she's face up, I'm going to put this guy in there under her knees. So it's going to be quite a bit of knee elevation. Just put her into something closer to a fetal position for that supine work. It can also be very important to get the face cradle height right. So ask initially at the beginning of the session and ask again about 10 minutes later to make sure that something hasn't started to develop, that their neck isn't getting a little tense. Something else that I want to do is to make sure that I'm always tracking my client. Even when your client is face down, there's a lot of information that you can still glean about how they're doing. So if you notice them tightening up, if you notice them holding their breath, then that can be a good time to check in. And especially for this first session, make sure to stay in fairly constant communication. Ask whether pressure is too direct. Ask about these areas that can be more sensitive than others. Ask if things are too specific. And just be aware that fibromyalgia isn't all about touch sensitivity. It's also about other sorts of sensitivities. So some clients might have more sensitivity to smells or sounds or hot and cold. So they might not be able to enjoy aromatherapy, or they might think that hot stones that are fine for everybody else are too hot for them. So just be aware that this involves all of the senses, potentially. So if your client has extreme sensitivity in certain areas or in a lot of areas, start where they're able to receive contact. So if I've got a client who has their sensory nervous system turned up to 10 and I'm trying to convince it that it doesn't need that heightened sensitivity, I'm not going to just dive in to the most sensitive areas. I'm going to start by acclimating the rest of their body to my contact. So if I'm not able to work directly up in the shoulders right at first, I'll start in other areas and I'll gradually work my way into more and more contact with those areas that would otherwise not necessarily be able to receive direct contact. And it can also help to apply a mother hand nearby. So in places where they're able to receive direct contact, I'll sink in a little bit of my weight while I'm doing more direct work with other areas that might be more sensitive. This has a soothing effect on the nervous system, and it allows people to safely receive contact that might otherwise seem a little too challenging. When you research fibromyalgia, you're likely to come across the term tender points. These are points that are common for a lot of people with fibromyalgia that will be quite tender. And they tend to be in places that we're already familiar with as massage therapists, like right up here at this superior angle, up onto the neck, down onto the sacrum. And what I do with these points isn't necessarily to work with them like trigger points. I don't want to directly challenge them. Instead, I'm going to come at them from an angle. So my current client is able to receive more pressure, and she likes to have that little bit of challenge to those sensitive areas, and so I'm going to accommodate that. But I'm going to do so from a myofascial perspective. So instead of coming straight down at those potentially sensitive points, I'm going to come at them from an angle. I'm taking that superficial tissue and I'm steamrolling it. I'm dragging it down in a way. Or I could drag it outward, I could drag upward. Just instead of coming down directly toward the table, we are pushing that superficial fascia and dragging that deep fascia along with it. And this has some preliminary evidence behind it. There is a small study done with Swedish massage versus myofascial. It wasn't working with trigger points or anything like that, but the myofascial was more effective. That still needs to be replicated. This doesn't necessarily apply to this particular client, but some people will have extreme sensitivity that is distributed across their entire body, and it will be difficult for them to receive anything that we would recognize as a normal amount of pressure. And so I want you to kind of step away from what you consider necessary pressure, what you consider necessary speed for a massage to work. For those clients, don't think so much about pressing into muscle, because muscle isn't what's important here. We're having a conversation with their nervous system, and we're trying to give it evidence that it doesn't need all of that sensitivity. And the only way to do that is by applying touch in a way that gives a sense of safety. We're trying to soothe the nervous system and convince it that touch is not only safe, but it can also be healing. And that's a process of many sessions. That's something that I definitely try to put forward to my clients, that kind of reprogramming the nervous system takes as long to do as it did to initially get that heightened sensitivity. So be patient with yourself. Be patient with these contacts. Realize that it might take a good number of sessions. And even if you're barely able to make contact with a client, if you're able to do so in a way that is friendly to their body and friendly to their nervous system, you're going to be accomplishing a lot. And for clients who aren't able to receive a lot of direct contact to their areas of interest, think of other ways that you can send that message of safety and comfort to their nervous system. So things like cranial cradles, work with the hands and feet. Some of these clients will be able to receive reflexology. And things like craniosacral work and polarity therapy. Just different ways of interacting with their body, interacting with their nervous system. And after each session, just make sure to check in. Make sure to ask how they felt after that last session, if there were any negative side effects, if there was any soreness, if there was excessive fatigue. Massage is a bit of a challenge to the body, and there are other ways of working if what we normally do is too challenging, even if we make it as light as possible. And finally, if a client is in flare-up or has been getting a lot of flare-ups lately, avoid creating inflammation. So Allie is able to receive more direct work, but if she were in a current flare-up, I would avoid creating redness. I would avoid sinking in too much. I would err on the side of caution. So consider inflammation and the fact that clients with fibromyalgia can experience it in a more exaggerated way and for longer than other people might. So that's my general approach. I also want to be just a wellness cheerleader for my clients with fibromyalgia. If they tell me that they are having new symptoms, I want to encourage them to go back to their doctor and not just sit on those symptoms and do nothing about them. If they're telling me that they're thinking of trying yoga or trying some other wellness promoting activity, I want to encourage that. And the more that you know about fibromyalgia, the better you'll be able to say things like, well, I was just reading a study about how great physical activity is for these symptoms. Massage can kind of be a gateway drug to other wellness promoting activities, so the more of that I can do, the better. Staying within my scope of practice, of course. All right, y'all, let me know what you think down in the comments. If there are any other modifications that you make for your clients with fibromyalgia or that have worked well for you in the past, let me know. Consider subscribing, and I'll see you next time.